All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for hanging out with us this week, and welcome to JNUC. I want to remind everybody that there is no us here at Jamf without all of you. So thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for being here today. I'm really pumped that I got the opportunity to introduce the session and the speaker today. Amy O'Connor is a dear friend of mine, one of the sweetest human beings you'll ever meet in your life, until you were playing NFL Blitz in an arcade with her. And she will mercilessly beat you down. Not speaking from experience or anything like that. But in all seriousness, you're in for a treat today, hearing from Amy. She will be talking about leveraging communication to drive successful software implementations. And with that, Amy O'Connor.
Hey, y'all. It's kind of nice to have the lights in my eyes because I feel a little less on. But I've already seen all of you, so hi and good morning. It's my intention to not rush, but at the same time, leave a bunch of time for Q&A because I would love to live troubleshoot stuff that y'all are dealing with when it comes to using communication in your organizations. So this is just asking that you kindly not sue us. And appreciate that very much. You don't have to read it, just promise not to sue us. It's a joke. So this title is maybe a little unwieldy, but really what we're talking about is how do we get buy-in from people on the changes that we're making? How do we make sure that we're focusing on humans and not solely the technology? So a lot of stuff that I think y'all think about all day anyway, so I'm excited for the conversation. I am Amy O'Connor. I do play a mean game of arcade football, but I have been at Jamf for 5 years. I've had a bit of a winding career journey for the best. And so in every sector I've worked in, every organization, every group of people, the communication is always sort of the silver bullet, right? It either helps things work or it ruins things. So everywhere that I've traveled, I've seen that. I also have the fortunacy of having worked at Jamf for 5 years, but starting in customer success, really getting to know our product and our customers. I passed the 200, much to my surprise and delight, and just really dug in there before jumping into partner world and focusing on our MSP partners, just how I know Pat and some of the other folks in the room today. And that was a blast, and learned a lot about comms in that field too. And so now I actually focus on internal communications for Jamf. So my audience is Jamf, and it's really fun because I've had different seats at Jamf, and so I think that's been a helpful way to make sure we have the right seats at the table and are getting the right pieces of information to the right places. So this is what we're covering loosely. Again, I'm here for any of your comms questions, so don't hesitate as we get to the end. I actually brought some stickers, and if you ask a question, I'll give you a sticker. I'll also just give you a sticker if you come up and ask me later, but ask a question, it'll be fun. So, thinking about change. It is the only constant, and we especially feel that at Jamf, but I know you all feel that in your organizations too, because of how rapidly technology advances. We're always on the bleeding edge of something. We're always needing to be keeping folks up to date on what's going on and how it affects their day. So think about a change that you've recently implemented or maybe one that you're working on. Just kind of keep that in mind as we roll through things. Sometimes it helps me to play out a hypothetical as I listen to information. So taking action on that piece where you can feel like the communication can be broken down. One of the things I love the most about Jamf is that we've created this culture of learning. And I think that is overall super, super positive. We'll talk later about the difference between ask culture and search culture. But as far as the spirit of learning, it's really about sharing that we're all still learning, right? So I work with our executive team quite a bit on communications, and they'll reach out to me and say, I took this really cool course, or I went and visited this investor or partner or customer, let's talk to people about it. And so it's that reflection and taking moments for leaders, and not just executive leaders, not just people with C's in their title, but all of us can be leaders in that space of, hey, I read this cool article, I'd love to chat with somebody about it, or just jump into the thread and like, let me know your thoughts, right? To keep it open and say like, hey, we're all on this together. We're all trying to figure it out and keep rowing in the same direction. So other thing that we've implemented is meeting across departments to talk about upcoming changes in various departments. So what that's helped us do is ensure that we're not dumping a lot of change on people, and we're really being strategic about how often we are communicating changes, and if there are changes that sort of marry each other, that we're talking about them together so that it isn't that information overload. So we gather groups of leaders that kind of have their eye on, it's HR, it's IT, InfoSec, customer success, biz ops. We really get everybody at the table, and it gives us an opportunity to calendar things out and be really keenly in tune to the audience and ensure that people aren't getting drowned, which is hard to do with how fast everything moves. A key thing is to consider timing for different groups of people that you're talking to. So it depends on the project, right? But if you think about cascading communications, I'll give an example from inside Jamf. If something comes out of a board meeting, first it's going to be discussed with John's direct team. Then we're going to send something out to the VP Plus group, then to our directors, then to our managers, all of that before it goes out to all Jamf. This allows the leadership team to remain aligned. And it also gives, especially managers and like line managers, that opportunity to push back, ask questions, and be prepared for the questions that are going to be inevitably coming to them once any announcement goes out. I'm going to pause and drink some tea, because I don't know how many of you were out shouting all night, but unfortunately I was. Sweet, thanks for your patience. So, we know about these. I mean, this is just like, I could have just put the words human beings on this, because there's quite a bit of human error involved in working with humans. So, the resistance to change piece is what it is. I think it goes back to that, talking about change a lot, keeping it part of what leaders and individuals are talking about together in a spirit of learning. We see a lot more, of course, hybrid and async work, and even fully remote work. And that leads to, honestly, I love async comms, like that's one of the horses I'll charge on. But it can get messy, right? Somebody misses a meeting, they don't catch up on the meeting notes, and then suddenly we're rowing the same boat in opposite directions. And those communication breakdowns, sometimes it's silos, and those are much more easily formed in the environment we're in too. So there are plenty of challenges that we face, and then there are the unique employee personas that we know, the culture that we have. It varies quite widely, so it's not easy. So some of these, I won't read them fully to you, but communicating vision and telling people why is so easy but so key. And it takes somebody at the table realizing we've got to get this information out, in order to drive the conversation and drive the excitement around it, right? What goal are we meeting? What's the reason for this change? Especially when there's a lot of change going on, people start to just feel like, another change. It's like, well, let's make sure we're bringing it all back to the grander thesis statement, right? How it aligns with our goal and vision. Share some timelines and milestones. I think sometimes when we're in project build and ready to implement mode, it feels like little wins are just whatever, they're part of the project. But if you let the team know about it, like, hey, just checking in from this project that we've been telling you about, we got this and this and this done, and shout out to these 3 people who've been pivotal, right? It gives visibility, which, again, it's the piece of this communication, either winning it or ruining it. And so there's nothing that can be lost by over-communicating things that the whole team can know. Support channels. This can look different and different at different times of the project. We see a lot of success with setting up ask channels in Slack. So ask dash name of project. and communicating that out to our announce all channel. So people know where to go if something's broken, I can't find the thing I was looking for, something moved, or any other questions that they need answered more immediately. But sometimes it's nice to throw everybody on a Zoom webinar, run Q&A. Again, it depends on your culture, it depends on the weight of the project, but do consider this in advance so that as you're putting out that first communication, you can say, hey, and join the Slack channel, ask any questions you have. Aligning leadership comms. So this one could seem daunting, but I want to break it down in how easy it can be. And it's essentially to provide a bulleted list of what the project is, why it matters, who's working on it, and common questions you may hear. One sheet on a Word doc. Get that to all of your leadership team. Run it through the functional leader first, make sure that you're not missing anything, but then get it to the broader team and ensure that the leadership teams, all the way down to managers, and again, depending on your culture, your structure, having that consistent messaging really drives trust. And it's not hard, and it's kind of a magic wand. If they have these lists of questions, then they're prepared for them. And if they have that common language, then people recognize that common language, even if it isn't like, oh, I've heard these words before. There's something soothing when we're hearing messaging a second time, because we hear so many messages that we don't absorb a lot, or as much as, at least I wish I did. All right, so engaging employees is another favorite topic of mine. So consider who the affected users are, who should be at the table given that, right? Also, I would say, if you get the table assembled and you realize you know everybody there and or everybody looks the same, pull up another couple seats, right? Or ask somebody across the organization from you, what am I missing at this table? The sooner you do that, the better. And it avoids creating situations where you make your employees janitors who clean up messes rather than strategic thinkers, excuse me, who start early and remain engaged often. So offer that training and support and don't overthink it. We have an awesome enablement team. Not everybody has those resources, but your vendor does. And so really lean on them, even during your vetting process, about how they're gonna help with the training piece and really helping you get onboarded successfully. And sometimes they even have comms plans for you. You definitely wanna mess with them a little bit and make sure that it speaks to your specific people, but highly recommend letting that work be outsourced if you don't have the team to do it. And then establishing feedback loops. So this is a little bit different than setting up those question and answer groups or Zoom calls or whatever it might be that works for your culture. But the feedback loop is about not losing sight of the fact that the change was big. I think in comms, I'm definitely guilty of this, right? You think about something so long and you write it for so long, and then you send it out and you're like, all right, it's out there. Everybody knows now. The fact of the matter is, change is a lot slower than that. Our ability to absorb is a lot slower than that. So you really want to be talking to key folks and making sure that you're getting feedback that drives consistent communication about the project. Even if you just plan it out 6 months, you're going to learn what people engage with or what they don't. And then that can help you, in future projects, but certainly to ensure that there's no rumblings about the change that you're not aware of. So, another tea break. Not too long ago at Jamf, we were working across teams. So here's a good example from Jamf. And we were wanting to introduce an AI bot that can answer kind of common IT questions. Primary reason being cut down on ticketing and move into, here's where I'll talk about ask culture versus search culture. So in ask culture, and you see that a lot in startups and we see it a lot at Jamf, there's somebody that knows the answer, and you have to know who that person is. And if you don't, then you have to find the person who knows the answer, who can introduce you to the person who knows the answer. What we're trying to move away from is that it's not a great way to scale, right? So what we want to do is have the opportunity for folks to ask those common questions or get their common issues solved. This frees up our IT folks and other teams, HR, to focus on strategic thinking and big plans instead of closing out tickets, closing out tickets, closing out tickets. I know I'm preaching to the choir on that one. So we're thinking about who should be at the table, who does this affect? It affects everybody at Jamf. Everyone will have the opportunity to opt into this tool and use it if they want to. So if that's the case, how do we make it feel like it's ours and it's a project that belongs to all of us? It's not something that is a change that's being done to people. So one of the puzzle pieces was, what could we crowdsource? You know, like this is a new tool. It's kind of a funky one that had some different creative elements to it. So we decided, let's have Jamf name the bot. We get to name it whatever we want. Of course, and it was like, we call it Jamf bot. It's like, maybe we'll ask the team. And we did. And when I say there were hundreds of comments and suggestions in Slack, it's an understatement. People went nuts for this idea of, here's this thing that's coming, here's what I can tell you about it now, and here's how you can get involved right now. And you can be kind of silly about it. I think Bodie McBoatface was one of the top contenders, which I had to crush some dreams on that one. I was like, I think it's trademarked, so that's gonna be a no. So getting those ideas going, simple Slack message with emoji voting. Comment in the thread, put an emoji on any single one you like, and then in a week, I'll see what our top 5 are. We do, word to the wise, want to throw that through legal to make sure that you are not going to have to crush any employee dreams by going back and saying, actually, we can't call it that. So we narrowed our top choices down. And after presenting those, we had overwhelming support for the name Kaspernicus. And if you don't catch the reference, Casper Suite was the original name of Jamf Pro way back when. Maybe some of you are old enough in Jamf years to remember. But the bot name is a play on that, as well as a nod to Copernicus, a Polish astronomer who proposed the model of the solar system in which the planets orbit in perfect circles around the sun. And that was back in 1490 something, so we've come a long way. So, new trustee, AI Pal is named. People are amped about it. They feel like they've been a part of it, and we're generally just kind of have like a funny cadence going on about it. After that, we realized, well, the bot should have a face, right? There's gonna be a little icon that pops up and you're talking to the bot. So we have a design team at Jamf that I worked with on that. If you don't have a design team, open it up to the team. Canva is free. People can go in and create some and do the same thing, right? So drop the ideas for the actual illustration in there. What we did is, I think we had 4 or 5 different options and did the same voting system. And again, the dialogue was running because people had thoughts about the different images. And so this, ultimately, we landed with this absolutely adorable bot. That's the 404 error. That's my favorite one. So this is Kaspernicus. And there's like a personality to it already. As soon as folks saw it, it felt right. This was the overwhelming choice. So this is our trusty, honest, friendly guide. And some Jamfs lovingly refer to Kaspernicus as Caspy, which is always one of my favorite wins, 'cause, like, the bot's got a nickname. It is a part of the culture. So it feels like a part of the culture at launch because it became a part of the culture at launch of comms about launch. So it won't always look just like this, but it's embedding the team and the team's opinions in early and often, so that when you get to the end goal, it feels like a shared destination. So the leader of that team was the leader of the project, Melissa Dunham, a phenomenal colleague of ours. And we had really great adoption right away, beyond what we generally see for internal tools. And again, I think this comes to, certainly it's a tool that folks can use and it works really well, but also people knew about it and they were excited about it and they had a stake in the game. Going back to keeping comms going about these changes, make sure you're talking to the team about the rewards of the change. It's not just like, cool, the change launched and now we're all good. Well, what difference did it make, right? We knew that you're doing this, we knew it was important, so what? So these are a little bit outdated, but not by much, but maybe like 2 months or so. But my friend Bill in IT grabbed these stats for me, and I won't read them to you, but the time that is saved for our IT team and the types of projects I can see them able to focus on now without playing the ticket game all day has been really cool. And it might not seem like a ton for how big Jamf is, but that's over one issue per Jamf in 12 months. And folks like me in a comms role where I'm like, I've got Dropbox paper and email and Slack, I'm good. I don't open a lot of tickets. So we can look at that and see, who's doing what. But I think the average is pretty sweet, and generally people are going to the bot first, and then the bot opens a ticket, of course. Sorry, y'all, after, just in case, it needs human interaction. But the ability to make the bot something that felt like home to folks, a trusted resource that could be used and leaned on. And it's really revolutionized things for our IT team, but certainly at our cultural level as well. And we're still, we are nowhere near to search culture. We are slowly making our way there, and this is one step in that direction. But I would encourage you to just think about that in your own organization. It's the old get hit by a bus scenario, which is not very pretty, but you just really don't want your information living in one person's head. And people can work a lot faster if they can search and find the information that they need. As far as launching projects, whatever, maybe you're implementing Jamf. These things can still be a part of the conversation, really letting people know how it's going to affect their day early and often. So involve the broader team early. That's both making sure you have the right people at the table, and it's making sure that you're communicating as soon as you can, right? Even if you're saying this project will be completed in 18 months. There's nothing wrong with letting the team know, particularly if you have a really hungry, curious team, which we certainly do at Jamf, and I would imagine a lot of you do at your orgs. Make sure that you are routinely preparing for that change. It's that culture of learning. Whoa, change is wild. I feel it too, even though I'm a figurehead. Ha! That stuff doesn't go unnoticed, right? Because there is a lot that flows downstream, and without that context of everyone being a part of it, it can feel a little bit lonely, and certainly a little nerve-wracking. So we're trying to keep people ready to roll with the changes. And then that feedback-friendly environment. So feedback loops for the launch of the project and pre-launch. Those are those Slack rooms, Zoom conversations, opportunities for just open Q&A. But also after the fact, ensuring you're keeping the team up to date on what those changes have brought to the organization, and asking for feedback on how they're using the tool that you've launched or the policy, or whatever it might be that you're putting change into their worlds, and you are that messenger of the change. So that's a lot, I guess. I knew I would leave more than 15 minutes for Q&A, and I did. So we've got plenty of time for Q&A. Pat's going to run it for me, but I really appreciate your listening ears and you being here today. And as Pat said, just being here at JNUC, being a part of Jamf Nation, being a part of the Jamf community. A lot of things that we do internal at Jamf, we see move out into our community, and it's one of the reasons I love working here. So appreciate all of you very much, and ask any questions you've got, and I'm here for it. And if you'd rather ask a question in the hall later today. I won't change outfits, so you can just look for me, and I'm happy to chat anytime. Cool, cool.
Don't forget that if you ask questions,
Sticker.
a sticker.
It's true.
All right, we got some questions. Did you have one? Okay, okay.
So I think you've laid out a great plan as far as how communication goes. What are some pain points that you guys experience within your environment? I know in our environment, like there's several different channels for communication. We've polled our users about what their preferred method is, and they still happen to ignore it, right?
Yeah.
And they're like shocked and awed when something is coming up.
Isn't that wild? Yeah.
Any suggestions, ideas, recommendations around that?
Great question, and thanks. And yes, that is a universal feeling. Nothing like those first few questions that come in after you've been communicating about something for 3 months. It's like, someone's like, what is this? You're like, I promise we've been telling you about it. It's tricky at Jamf too. That's my first part of that answer. Something that I think is maybe annoying to employees, it isn't annoying to me, but having to check off on having read something. I know I was learning a little bit more about Amazon internal comms this week. And something that they do is they gather the team together and have a very clear document about what the change is. And the first 5 minutes of the meeting is everyone reading it together. Just on mute and read it. And then once you've read it, you put your thumbs up and you put any comments that you have in the draft, and then you discuss for 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be a long thing, but as sad as it is, right, you've got to kind of watch people read it. Like, please check the box that you understand this. Again, this is a good reason to have a team across the org that you can be cognizant of other changes that are coming, to let the team know about 5 things that are coming up that are related at the same time, instead of death by 1,000 cuts, dropping these changes, you might get more eyes. I find that the meatier the better. And it also shows that cross-departmental collaboration that I think people really like to know is happening, particularly around change. But I'm not gonna lie, it's tricky at Jamf too. I mean, we've got Announce All Jamf as our primary Slack channel for announcements. We can't make sure that people don't mute it. Well, okay, you just missed everything. And we kind of got away from email for that reason, because we were just doubling up. It was like, no, you have to go to the channel. We used to have a weekly team meeting, which speaks to where we came from. You know, it was really just like Zach and Chip standing in Minneapolis Town Hall and like with slides and barely great video production being live streamed across the world. And it was awesome for the time where Jamf at scale could provide all the announcements you needed for the week on a Monday morning. That ain't it anymore, right? Not even close. And so it has to be that async piece, which is why we decided on Slack. But again, I know people have it muted, and we can't unforce or force them to watch. So, you know, as tricky as it can be, I also like to remind folks that it is the vocal minority that tends to get the most upset about these things or push back the most immediately without having the information they need to have a fully formed opinion. So it can be really annoying when you've communicated quite a bit and people aren't listening, but just remember that probably 45 to 55% of people read it and went, great, thanks. Moving on with my day. So try to take that with a grain of salt too, because you can't please everybody or reach everybody's eyes. I would recommend a book to everybody here whose authors I can't remember, so I'm sorry to the authors, but it's called Smart Brevity. It's the gentleman who started Axios, the news company. And it's a short book, and they write it in Smart Brevity. So you kind of learn it as you read. But basically, it's the bullet point pieces. Why does this matter? Why does it matter to me? Which departments are affected? And you tell people at the beginning how long it will take to read. So it's like, this is a 1-minute read. Here are the bullet points.
What was the name of that book again?
Smart Brevity. And if you even just look for Axios founder's book, but I attended a session that they did, and whew, I mean, it was really, really mind-blowing. One of the statistics is we have 0.03 seconds to get people's attention to read something. So don't feel bad when they don't read, right? I mean, we're fighting TikTok, y'all. It's gonna be tough. Yeah. Cool, thank you for that question.
Okay. I feel like, yes, I thought I saw a hand back here.
So I work in healthcare, IT, and when you were talking about telling people the why, so we have a lot of different roles. Are you finding you have to find the why for each area, whether like within your world it's engineers or sales or whatever?
That's a really great question. And yes and no. I think at Jamf, in some ways it's simple because we have two values that drive everything. Selflessness and relentless self-improvement. So there's not a seat on the bus that is not living those principles. So if you have a value statement like that, that can really help to, you don't just want to hammer them in, find different ways to talk about the values, but think about that thread that makes your company what it is, and just be sure you're weaving that through everything, right? Is that maybe the doctors want to hear more from a different group or vice versa, and you just start to kind of embed a little bit more of each group into those pieces so that it's less about, here's what's specifically for you, and it's about, here's something that can affect the whole organization, and here's the part that you play, and even telling the rest of the team, here's the part that this team plays. So I think rather than trying to bifurcate the teams any further than they are, to try and find, again, it's my metaphor though, the thread that weaves who you are. Who are we? What can we all agree that we all are together, no matter what seat on the bus I'm in? Is that helpful?
It's a great point. I mean, so the job I have in IT is interacting more with the clinical side of the house. My first decade in IT, I was on the infrastructure side.
Sure.
And those are the people I'm trying to now weave that point to say, you can sit in the back room and do firewall stuff all day.
Yes.
Here's the caring part that ties into it. So yeah, you're
100%.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about this role is that it's sourcing stories. You know, you get to hear really cool stories and then tell them to people. So, you know, depending on who you've got on your bench, that could be a cool thing to just make sure you're getting some of those frontline stories and being able to tell them in a way that resonates with firewall builders, right? Yeah. Thank you for that.
You mentioned the idea of having to develop the why at the very beginning to help engage it, but there's always going to be the old fuddy-duddy, and I say that lovingly because sometimes I'm one of them.
Understood.
That is like, come on, we've already got a working system, you know, et cetera. Any suggestions on when you get that pushback of the one or two people? You mentioned also the vocal minority, but what are some tricks to getting those people that have just kind of hit us stuck in their ways saying, how do you get them to let go and any advice you have on breaking past that giant mentality would be great.
Absolutely. Yep, that's a tricky one. And I've dealt with it, again, in every sector I've worked in. Hospitality, finance, philanthropy, rock and roll bands. It's all the same. There's always that one. Couple of ideas. Depends on the personality. Invite them to the table. Thank them for the discourse. Thank them for the dialogue. Thank them for their perspective. Ask if they can you get 30 minutes with them and talk with them more about the concerns they have. And post that publicly. If they're posting their gripe publicly, then say, hey, thank you for this question. Thank you for pointing this out. This will be a huge change. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Let's grab 30 minutes. Not only does that tell the person, you're heard, we see you, but it shows the rest of the organization, it's okay to ask questions, and then we'll take it offline. We're not gonna hash it out in a thread on Slack. I mean, that's silliness. It's not Twitter. But address it right away and address it with gratitude. And sometimes you will find that softens the disagreement. And sometimes you just have to learn to disagree, which John, our CEO, talks about this a lot. It's one of my favorite things he talks about is disagreeing in the room. You know, you're in the room, you're talking about it, disagree there. Don't leave and have a little after the meeting, right? If you disagree in the room, as uncomfortable as it is, you all leave rowing in the same direction. But if you save those disagreements or you stifle them in public channels, they'll go talk to somebody who'll listen, man. And they'll find somebody. And they'll take each other down and down and down the spiral. So get in front of that. As soon as you see one of those kind of hot-headed things coming through, welcome it. Of course, thank you.
So how do you mentioned engaging employees, crowdsourcing, and open Q&A. How do you balance the old too many hands in the cookie jar with different perspectives and personas, and then you get the people who just don't feel like they were heard, or hey, why am I engaging? I never get this anyways.
Yes.
And then the power balance of the individual contributors, like who think that, versus a VP saying, well, this is my idea. Like we should do this.
Yes.
I'm in product, so that's that's always a mess, anyways. So
Yeah,
how do you
dude.
balance that?
No, great question. It's not easy at Jamf. I'll start out by saying that again. Something that we've done recently that has been wildly successful for internal changes is to create a change focus group, I think they're calling it. I don't lead that, but our change org does. But that is built of those individual contributors that we just were talking about, right? And also people that just have a lot of feedback, really like to be involved. It gives them a place in the process, but it's not too soon in the process. So leave those folks with the general public getting the drip campaign of, hey, here's how this thing is going, and it's going great. And here are some of the people at the table that are doing great, and shout out to this person for their work here. Like they get all of that information just like everybody else, but you bring them in just a little bit before launch and say, what are we missing here? And listen. And let them know that all of their feedback won't be able to be implemented, but how important it is. There will be things you take from it, right? And changes you'll make just because we all have our things we don't see from our seats. But I think, yeah, keep them seated with the general public. Note who they are, keep a list, and then shoot them a BCC email saying, hey, you've been selected. We also like to reach out to managers and say, who should we talk to on your team? So if you have teams that are frequently like, what about us? Talk to those managers and say, like, who would be the right person to bring in a little earlier, even before that change group, right? If it is like a sticky wicket. Cool. Yeah, of course. Thanks for that. Yeah.
Hi. So I've become quite versed in change in the last 12 months with software implementations. Just in the last 12 months, we've gone from Google to Microsoft, Slack to Teams, Intune to Manage Engine for Windows,
Yeah.
and we're in the middle of on-prem to Atlassian Cloud.
Whew. I just
So,
got like the goosebumps on the back of your brain
Yeah.
thing. It was like, ooh, shiver me timbers.
IT director role has been fun.
Ooh, bless you.
And it's really just rolling back other people's decisions.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
You mentioned these roundtables you're having, and I was just kind of wondering, what role level are these participants?
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of a second question, how do you combat and communicate your way through change fatigue?
Change fatigue. Whew. Well, we've all got it. Maybe no group more than yours. That's a lot. To address that first, I will go back to trying to communicate changes in clumps if you can, reaching out across the organization, saying what else is going on, how can we weave that thread of who we are through this and get the team, you know, involved in that. Call out that there's a lot of change. You know, I used to manage a restaurant, and I would say to the servers, don't suggest the steak if you don't like the steak. Like, people see right through that, right? So it's like, just authentically be like, listen, y'all, we know you're drinking from the fire hose, and there's a lot going on, but like, stick with us, come back to that goal, come back to the why, come back to, we're not just doing this to torture you, and celebrate some of those smaller wins along the way. As far as the kind of group sessions, I think you could think about it in the cascading way, depending on what the project is, what the scope is. Maybe it is just directors plus. Maybe it's just all managers, if you think they're going to be fielding a lot of questions. For some of the bigger changes that we've implemented recently at Jamf, we'll open that to everyone. It is a moderated Q&A, and we generally have the chat off. So it is more like it's more like this and less like a conversation. But I think it still works. And again, you're getting those people who have the seat at the table speaking to their expertise off the cuff, which is what I find is really sticky for folks. If I can get our execs passing a microphone and taking questions, that's my favorite thing to do, right? So again, there's something to that physical, like that transparency that it's beyond words. People want that face time. They want to know what decision makers are thinking, and they want to be able to have that dialogue and really, you know, building a culture of learning is building a culture of listening. It's the same thing, right? So I hope that helps. Yeah, thank you.
One of the tenets you mentioned was routinely prepare for change.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry if I missed it, but are you speaking specifically just different forms of communication, or do you have like set activities that you're preparing your staff for general change?
Great question. At a manager level, I do a monthly newsletter of the biggest things they need to know, because it can be a lot, right? So we want to, part of the newsletter is driving conversations with the team. So I'll send out suggested questions, right? So something like, how did you feel about XYZ during the Jamf report? Recently, this message went out to announce all Jamf. Here's how it specifically affects our team, ... I'm hosting a 20-minute stand-up next week to, right? So it's the cascading communications about change in a way that gets to the, I call the ground floor, right? I'm an individual contributor, but all of our individual contributors. Beyond that, it's a big, we call it the Internal Communications Council internally, but that's the group I keep referencing of cross-departmental leaders who have their eyes on things. So that helps us, from a comms perspective, prepare for change. Because I get, you know, our CISO can tell me, well, in 6 months, we're going to have XYZ announcement. And we're going to put out 3 reminders before, you know, compliance training ends or what have you. Then I've got that on my radar. I've got that on my calendar. I know when something urgent or on fire comes up, what can move and what can't move. So from a comms perspective, making sure you're surveying the org. From an organization perspective, make sure your leaders are talking about it, all the way down to your line level managers who should be driving dialogue and conversations about changes as they happen. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, got a question. Got a couple questions.
I think we're
at
nearing
time, right?
time.
Yeah.
Well, I've got 45 seconds, so let's get one in. I can do it.
So I was gonna say, I think the hardest communication I've been dealing with is providing updates within my direct team.
Yes.
Not externally. The team that we work closely with thinks that everything is urgent, and trying to level that out of what's urgent. Can we kind of go through the process of
Yeah.
urgent so we're not we're able to focus on things that we need to focus. And here's the process of like non-urgent things and et cetera.
Yeah.
But they still tend to think it's urgent. So the ways that I've like tried to handle this is like creating documentation, going to a team meeting, asking for feedback.
Yep.
But I'm just wondering if there's any other ways that you can.
Yeah.
Maybe the channels that I'm going to aren't good, but are there any other ways that possibly?
It's a great question, and it's a common thing for sure. Going way back to my days as an exec assistant in philanthropy, I learned one of my favorite tools to prioritize for myself, and that's the 4-quadrant. I don't know if anybody else knows it in here, but it's your upper left is urgent and important. Upper right is not urgent but important. Bottom left is, I'm picturing it in my head, I'm a little bit too visual for my own good. Not urgent, not important. But then what's the important, because I'll find it for you. It exists, but essentially what you can do for the team, if you have a space where you can all gather together and just have that running list. So even within those 4 quadrants, team member name, and then they've got their things that, so we're all looking at our priorities and we're making sure that we're spending the most of our time in important, not urgent. The other quadrant, it has to do with, it's like your emergency is not my, yeah. Yes, yeah, things on fire. And, especially I think folks younger in their career or that are in, that are in a position to take on things, sometimes speed is the easiest thing to check off, right? So you're like, cool, got that done. So I understand it, right? But I think if you could get a visual going for the team or even in your individual team meetings with individuals, make sure they're using that or something like that that works for them. But the point being, you tell them exactly what percentage of time they should be spending here and there. And so when they are faced with 2 different things they could be doing, and walk them right through that. Okay, here's an example from your urgent, not important list and your important, not urgent list. You're gonna do the important, not urgent thing, right? You're not gonna do the urgent, not important thing. Save those for the end of the day if you can get to them. And the chunk, So again, maybe it's that I'm really visual, but that has been really, I still use that. I don't use it daily anymore because my job kind of flies wherever the business is flying. But when I feel overwhelmed, I go right back to it every time. And it really is a good sieve for my own propensity to just be a task rabbit. Thank you for that.
Great questions.
you
2
all.
things before we wrap up. Amy,
Stickers.
if folks want to get a hold of you, how can they do
Yeah, LinkedIn is great. I'm terrible at LinkedIn, but it's still the best way to get to me. You can also email me. My Jamf email address is amy.o'connor, no apostrophe, @Jamf. And I'm happy to just be like, hey, I was at your session, I've got a question. Literally anytime, like 2 years from now. I think I'll still be here. Now maybe I cursed at y'all. Uh-oh, heard it here first. But no, I've got a bunch of stickers. Certainly if you asked a question and want one, come up. But if you want one anyway, they're these cute little one Jamf hearts.
So cool.
They're pretty sweet.
Yeah.
But y'all have been very sweet. I've really appreciated the discussion. I'm so glad you had so many questions. This is the highlight of my JNUC. So find me at the party tonight. I will change outfits before that, though. So,
All right, y'all.
Thank you so much.
Amy O'Connor.